Quorum.
All right.
No, maybe you don't think so looking around the room, but we got a quorum.
If the right people show
We're
up.
going to work, and we're going to try to get you out of here, make up some time for past meetings. So let's call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board of the Met Council. It is September 17th, 2025, 12:31 p.m. And is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Anderson.
Second, Gotel.
All right. We got a motion and a second to approve the agenda that's been published to our group and the public. Any further conversation? All those in favor of adoption of the agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We have an agenda to work from. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the tab on a matter of concern to them? All right. I don't see anybody coming forward.
One of these days, we will have some.
Yeah, they have in the
You will.
past. Yeah.
All right, and let's then go to past the public invitation. I think we're still planning in October. We're going to talk about the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement.
At the tab executive.
In more detail? Okay, good.
Yes, that's
So
tab executive.
next month. So I'm glad it's on the agenda here in written form. People have a chance to take a look at it as they review the agenda, so we'll talk about it in more detail in October. I was out at Mystic Lake a week or so ago there's a film that's going to be produced called The Seventh, and I got invited out there. It was an interesting group of people out there. Really, kind of my first experience with a lot of tribal leadership and people from around the country that had come in to see a little preview of this film that was coming. Anyway, so let's get past the public invitation, then on to reports. I don't have anything to report. We didn't have an exec committee meeting. The one thing I will talk about, and Gary and I talked about it just briefly beforehand, we had a webinar a week or so ago, I think, on that was nationwide, U.S. Conference of Mayors, where I sit, as you know, as the chair of the Transportation Committee. It was all about, Connie may need to cover yours, you and Molly now. It was about local interests, transportation funding. So it was AMPO, NACO, National Association of Development Organizations, NATO, NARC, which is the National Association of Regional Councils, the National League of Cities, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors had a webinar on transportation infrastructure and the notion that this whole landscape is shifting a little bit post-COVID, that we're seeing more and more pressure on local roadway systems, both with respect to work habits of people and also the habits of consumers, causing us to have more pressure on roadway systems by delivery trucks in the neighborhoods. And in some of the cities around the country, I'm thinking of like Everett, Washington, where they've got big Amazon distribution centers, they're just tearing up their local roads. And of course, the money isn't necessarily flowing down the way it might otherwise on those traditional formulas. So do we need to be thinking about maybe a separate category for local governments, whether it be county or city, on that issue? So we had several presenters, I think, from the National League of Cities, NACO, and then I presented on behalf of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So stay tuned on that as we think about reauthorization starting in September 2026. And Connie's mentioned that before, that that's a critical time for all of us to be thinking about that next round of funding for our nation's transportation system. And that's it for me. And then Connie, I'll turn to you for the update from MnDOT.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As usual, I'll give a couple updates on our safety numbers of how that's going. We've had, since the last meeting in Metro, we've had, well, when I wrote my notes was 7 fatalities, but I think there was another one yesterday, so 8 fatalities in the Metro area. Normally, Metro contributes to about 1/3 of the statewide numbers. And as far as vehicles go, and 2/3 of all the fatalities statewide are in Metro, which kind of makes sense, but it's unfortunate. At the statewide level, we've had 28 28 fatalities, but it's a lot less than month of July was 45 for whatever reason was a lot. And the state has about 60 fewer traffic-related deaths at the end of August since last year. So we have, I mentioned last time too, we're at a slower trend, which is great, great news. And so we're about 60 less than what we were last year this time, which means we were projected to be less than 400 for next year, for end of this year. Couple of updates, some related to what the chair talked about. First, I wanted to say the local road improvement program, as you all know, there was $47 million through the state legislature that was given last time, GO bonds, that local entities can, this is basically counties, state aid cities, non-state aid cities and townships can tap into and provide some construction dollars, capital construction only. As you may know, historically, always when legislature provides bonding dollars, whether it's bridges or roads, they want the local entities to provide match money, which is for the engineering and maybe the approach, some of the approach work and things like that. And that's limited to about $1.5 million for per application. It started yesterday, and I think it's going to go through December, mid-December 12th, I think. And then by March 30th, it'll be all determined. So if your agency is interested in on a local road project, that's up to $1.5 million, as I said. So the state aid office, MnDOT state aid office, is those of you with the local agencies, cities and counties work with, and you can work with them on that. Federal funding, I don't think I need to mention more. They're working on, I think there's some traction that they're talking, but I think it's all for a continued resolution type of a deal, which would be done by the end of this month. And from what I hear, it would be extended to November 20th, right before Thanksgiving is what, but just a short-term deal. You also have heard that at the DOT level, US DOT level, there's a lot of cancellations going on, and recently there's been a big wave, letters being sent to all the DOTs about cancellation of grants that have been given. A lot of them have already been signed, and even funds exchanged. So even that late in the process, they're being canceled. So, and these are grants that were made with the last administration, with the OST, the Office of Secretary of Transportation. There are those build and raise grants, mega grants, infra, safe street and roads for all, neighborhood access and equity, and then also there's community connection type grants as well. So, and at the recent AASHTO meeting, states are talking more and more about, there's always discussions whether at national level you want to have formula funds or grant funds. Grant funds are more competitive, as you know. All the states go and try to be innovative and use their marketing strategies, and Minnesota has been pretty successful the past few years in receiving those funds. But who knows, with politics and all of that, maybe it's best to just give everybody a lot of states say to just give them do it all formula based, like 95% of it, give the money back to the states, which is our own gas tax that we send there, and let the states decide where it's divided up, and maybe keep a little bit for some special projects nationally that can be used. As you may know, several of our local agencies are in Washington, D.C. as we speak, doing through the fly-in. I know Washington County is there, and other counties and cities as well. with the Flying Through the Transportation Alliance. I used to go more to those when I was on the private side, but I know we are there, the commissioners there visiting with folks, and of course, the local agencies, and that's always a great effort to be there in front of our congressional delegation. A quick thing that I wanted to mention that I have gotten involved with, and that has to do, I don't want to down the conversation, but it has to do with mental health. And that's mental health and as it relates to directly suicide preventions in the construction industry. You probably don't hear as much about it. We have talked about here about suicide fences and things like that, but what's happening nationally in the construction industry, and it seems to be because of the level of work, how much work is out there, where people have a hard time coping with it. Maybe they're asked to go to different cities to do work, and it affects their family lives. And the younger generation would much prefer to be with their families instead of being out always on the road. So that affects people differently, and it is surprisingly the highest. Suicide is the highest, is at its highest in the construction industry, and many states have done this, are trying to figure out what to do about it. And in Minnesota, we've started about 2 years ago. Our Associated General Contractors, our construction companies, along with the unions, LIUNA, Carpenters, the 49ers, and so on, created an alliance, and then they added the third leg of the stool, which is the owners. And the owners who are so far involved is MnDOT, Met Council, Department of Administration, who does vertical construction, and also MAC. MAC is involved as well. So we had a workshop last week in Rochester at the CC's Health Center. I don't know if it's a beautiful old building that's been there for many, many years. And we had a partnership workshop there. And basically the goal was to work together and try to understand it better. And then the goal ended up being to figure out what over the next 90 days, what it is that each leg of the stool would do. And I suggested that there's a fourth leg of the stool, which is a little bit harder to figure out, and that is the public expectation and policymakers. There's so much, like I've talked about construction here, where we've gotten pressure from public. Why don't you work at nights? Why don't you get it done quicker? And that's all awesome, and we should do. But what we don't see in the background is what it does to the contractors, workers, and very, very surprised to hear that some of the unions talk about there's not a week or month that goes by that they don't have a funeral. Again, we don't hear about it, but it's something behind the scenes to kind of pay attention to, and how it affects them, and it affects how we go ask for dollars. I'm not saying we should ask for less dollars. I'm not saying we should expedite construction where needs to be, but at the minimum, it needs to be talked about and more. And I got volunteered by my boss, the commissioner, to help lead the effort on the owner's side, and then working with those other legs to try and figure out. So I just wanted to mention that. Again, it's going on in many, many states. I know Florida has done that. They've signed a pledge to do more. And I think the biggest part is to be okay to talk about it, because often when mental health gets involved, you don't talk about it, and it's something that's very rare. So and difficult conversations to have. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone. There's probably more conversations to have into the future about the subject. So with that, I yield for questions.
Yeah. Questions for Connie or comments based on his report out on those various topics? You know, Connie, one thing, yeah, Peter, go ahead and then I'll ask a
Thank you,
question.
Mr. Chair. How has protecting your workers on the roadways from, in construction zones? I know at the beginning of the summer, you mentioned that's a high priority, again, your colleagues getting hurt, road repair, whatever.
Yeah.
In construction.
Mr. Chair, thanks for the question, Member Dugan. It's a subject that comes up to, I was just at our Anoka and Maple Grove truck stations, and the guys that work out on the road, and the same goes with the county and city folks, they don't, we have a lot of emphasis on safety and the road users, and road users historically been defined as, the whole TZD initiative as those who use our citizens that drive the road. And there hasn't been as much emphasis on those who work on the road, which is our employees. And they've been asking, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Because when you're working on the shoulder and cars buzz by in trucks at high speeds, it's not very comfortable. And they've asked, my solution would be enforcement, I mean, people do it because they can, unfortunately. And, but that's out of our control, and it's up to the patrol and police and those types of things. But one thing we have done for that, because I heard it last year from our folks, is to do more PSAs, public service announcements. And you may have heard on the radio or on TV, and we've decided to spend some of our district budgets to do that, and social media actually for folks to get notes on their phones, reminding people. It's similar to what McDonald's does. They put up the golden arches and get you all hungry to go get a Big Mac. And I think those types of advertisements, I think, is important to keep reminding people to move over. Folks move over when there's a policeman or an officer out on the side of the road, but if our workers are working, not necessarily. So thanks for that question. I think we're doing something about it.
One of the things that you mentioned in terms of the mental health aspects for construction workers caused me to think about, when you give that fatality report, do you have a sense of annually, what number of fatalities involve mental health issues or suicides by, driving into an object or driving into another vehicle?
Do you mean if the numbers on how many people commit suicide?
Of the total fatalities, how many of them are self-inflicted or they hurt somebody else in the process?
Those are pretty private data, but I think we can come up with that number, and a lot of them get, a lot of it is personal reasons, and they do it at home. And anyway, I had a story I wanted to say, but I decided not to.
Okay.
But
all right, thanks. Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Thank you. Kind of a two-part question. Is this on? Oh, there you go. Related to potential dissolving of the grant funding and just giving the money back to the states as kind of a larger sum chunk, is that an idea that's coming from the feds, or is that an idea among the states that they are considering lobbying the feds for? And then the second part of that question is, do you believe that if it's not as much of a grant process and it is more like to be up to the legislator to dig that out, do you see that having any potential impacts to project preparation time or environmental review standards?
Thank you, Member Marino.
yeah, thanks for the question. I don't think it would have impact on because if it's formula funds, the benefit of that would be that how much dollars you're getting, so then each year you can prepare for. Grants is great, is big chunks of money coming, but you don't know if you're going to get it or not. And it's hard so you end up preparing for a project maybe with the hope that money will come, and then it may or may not come. So I think it would, in my mind, it would have a positive effect as far as being able to prepare for the project. And then the first part of the question about the grants, this is something that the federal government has decided to as part of their, and it's a bit unorganized, as you can tell. It's we don't know. I don't think the, anyway, I better watch what I say there, but I think it's coming in pieces. You know, we don't know what the goal is. I think going back to the chair's conversation about locals and grants for locals and projects, I think one thing that resonates now with the current administration may be anything that's related to economic development and prosperity can resonate. I think counties in our state, all counties want to grow. I think they want to increase their population. They want to attract people to come live there, and which is why many counties in our state, or in Metro for sure, are even investing on the trunk highway system that helps the prosperity of their county and growth and business development. So that would be an angle, I think, to take as far as marketing the product.
Any follow-on, Member Moreno?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I forgot to mention that this coalition of these five, I'll say, local groups is called LOT. That's the acronym, Local Officials in Transportation. You know, then representing thousands of counties, cities, towns, planning agencies, and regional economic development entities all across the country. And so at the next reauthorization, it'll be interesting. I think we're fortunate here in Minnesota. Local governments have a good relationship with our state government, and especially from a DOT standpoint, I think, and that's not true in every state. I think some local jurisdictions feel like in their states, they don't really have much of a say or much of a partnership, if you will.
It is, you're so true with that, but so right. I think we have as I mentioned earlier, state aid. We have the state aid system that was put in place by the legislature now, going 65, 70 years ago. And it was a great way of having relationships, and they work really well together. It's a great example nationally that many states don't have.
So we knew that Frank Kolash wasn't going to be here today for MPCA, but and Amanda Jarrett Smith was going to try to get here late, but she's still not here. So we can, maybe when she comes.
I think she had a meeting till 1 o'clock in an office over here, so I expect her
Okay,
to show up
maybe
pretty soon. Yeah.
we'll loop her in when she comes in, stick her in the middle of some of the informational items. And I don't see Carl Crimmins or Bridget Reef here from the MAC. But I did notice on national news this morning that J.D. Power had awarded, in all these different categories, they had awarded Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. They were #1 in the country. Wow. Customer satisfaction in terms of what we have here in whatever category they're in. Indianapolis got high marks too, but Minneapolis was the first airport that they named on national television this morning. So would have been good to hear more about that. And I think tomorrow noon down at the Hyatt downtown is State of the Airport presentation by Brian Ricks. So if anybody's interested in trying to get down there at the last minute, you can think about that. We'll come back to MPCA, and we don't have Deb Barber with us. She's been named, as many of you know, probably all of you know, the interim chair of the Met Council. And I don't see Member Chambliss here, her alternate either. So we'll have to hold on a report from them. But our steadfast colleague, Gary Hansen's here.
I am here, yes.
And ready to report out on Suburban Transit Authority activities.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And by the way, really appreciated your comments in that meeting the other day in that coalition. It's an interesting group, and they have common interest, and we're all trying to find ways to maximize funding opportunities. And so working together to do that is a great idea. So,
No, thank you.
The suburban transit providers report continued overall ridership increases. Maple Grove Transit's state fare ridership was up over 10% from last year, setting a record. Plymouth Metrolink is evaluating potential service improvements resulting from its joint transit needs assessment study with Maple Grove. Southwest Transit's airport route ridership continues to increase, totaling more than 4,100 riders in August, up 146% since the April launch. And Southwest State Fare ridership was more than 110,000, their second largest total ever. Renaissance Festival ridership was up 20%. Minnesota Valley Transit Authority Connect Microtransit ridership was up more than 36% over last year to nearly 140,000. And State Fair ridership increased 17% to a record nearly 150,000. And Renaissance Festival ridership through Labor Day was up 15%, also setting a record high. So the suburban providers are staying busy. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, it's really good to hear that we're taking advantage of the services that are available and the equipment we have invested.
And those special services are proving to be very popular.
Which one?
The special services like the State
yeah.
Fair ridership and Renaissance
Great.
Festival and those things, yep.
Okay.
Just a comment, if I may, on the
Yes, please.
Renaissance Transit. That has removed a tremendous bottleneck on 169 that was actually quite dangerous. It was backed up forever, some days, and so when they had aggressive transit, it removed all that bottleneck on 169, or most of it, yeah.
Did you give up your gig out there as a medieval knight?
The last time I went, well, maybe I went one other time, but the last time I went to Renaissance, it was in Jonathan. That's how long ago. That was I think I was in high school or something.
Okay.
Carla Bean. Carla Bean. Oh.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it possible to get, if you can, like a breakdown of the, at least like the park and rides population for the state fair? I know the mayor and I both are very, very, very appreciative of the Cottage Grove spot. We used to have one at Newport, but guess what? Now we have housing there, and so there isn't enough parking to host everybody. That's a good problem to have, Mayor, that we have the workforce housing there now. But I think there's relevance in knowing kind of those numbers as we're growing in the East Metro. We have the Gold Line, which we're going to hear a little bit about, and the expansion of the Gold Line today, which we're excited about and supportive of. But I think it's important to kind of know maybe the growth in the pockets.
No, that's a good thought. I'm sure Elaine can talk to staff internally about that from an MTC standpoint. And Member Hanson, maybe you can gather that information up in a little bit more detail too. Elaine, go ahead.
I can actually answer for MVTA. I have their app, and so I get the notifications, but they had 2 park and rides set up, Burnsville Transit Station and Egan Transit Station. And usually by 9:30, I was getting a notification that the Egan Transit Station lot was full.
It's full.
And so they added within a couple of days?
And so we added overflow parking at our Civic Arena in Egan, and then we're also sending people to Burnsville.
So that one, within a couple hours, also was getting full. So definitely for the MBT area, that was. And knowing that, I went to the park and ride, the ramp by the mall, since I was getting those other notifications.
Has anybody else had an experience where they've stopped serving your community or, to the state fair, Metro Transit? Like they stopped running from Southdale for some reason.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, and we get a lot of people that call and say.
So I go over to Bloomington now.
Yeah, why, that would be a good question too,
Yeah.
Elaine. Why are they stopping service from some of these key locations? Like their Southdale Transportation Hub is a great location to run from to the state fair. Why did they stop? We'd like to have them back. All those communities, Richfield, Bloomington, Edina, right there.
Well, Richfield had one down by Best Buy, but again, that got developed, so, where we used to have one a long time ago. And so, I mean, that same good problem.
Okay.
It's a question over here.
Yes, go ahead. Member
just
Marino, go ahead.
Looked it up, and this is not for individual stations, but as a whole for ridership, in 2024, it was 331,000 rides were taken to the state fair. In 2025, it's 384, so an increase of 53,000.
Nice.
People want to use the service.
Yeah. Member Dugan.
It makes life so much
Member Dugan.
simpler. Okay, Member Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of my very industrious alternate, I have this question. Rachel comments that she took MBTA to the fair and is concerned about the expense for families. Is there a part that the systems could use to do for family passes or the like. Did I get that? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We've had some really good TAC chairs over the years, and Joe McPherson continues that trend. Another really pleasurable guy to work with as we work, do the work of the TAB and the TAC together. And I don't know if you have any TAC report that you want to make or not before we get to the informational items.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Chair,
That sounds
welcome.
like a setup. That sounds like a setup right there. Appreciate the comments. Mr. Chair, members, so nothing to add. We didn't have a TAC meeting this month, but one thing to note, I know that all the members, either on TAC or funding and programming, even TAB members have been paying close attention to the regional solicitation update. And we recently just closed the comment section on the actual application. So for those of you that participated in that, offered comments, thank you. A lot more work yet to be done, but that was a big lift. So that's all I have.
Okay, good. Any questions for the chair? Okay, thank you. Minutes. Have people reviewed the minutes? Any changes, additions? Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of August 20, 2025.
So moved, Anderson.
Second, Bailey.
All right, we've got a motion and a second on approval of the minutes for the August 2025 meeting of the TAB. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approval of those minutes as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We approve the minutes for August 20, 2025. They stand approved. We have no business items in this month, which is really highly unusual for us as a group. And so we had a chance to look at some of the informational items that we wanted to make sure that we provided some extra level of knowledge to all of you on a couple of different matters. So we got Bradley Bobbitt here with us, I think, from MTS, who's going to talk about the, as Commissioner Bingham said, the Gold Line extension and what's happening there, Blue Line extension. And we appreciate this update. And then we've got some amendment issues to talk about too.
There we go. Excellent. All right.
Here we go.
Thank you, Chair. Members, my name is Bradley Bobbitt. I'm a planner on the MTS planning team, and I'm our transit subject matter expert, lead planner. Just here to give a summary of the comments we received during the public comment period for the amendment to the transportation policy plan. That would be amending the alignment for Blue Line extension and adding in Gold Line extension. So won't really be covering the scope of the amendment. We've covered that previously. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them, but mostly just focusing on the comments we received and the engagement we did during the public comment period on the amendment. And then I'll cover some of the next steps from here, going to final approval by the Met Council. So we held a public comment period from July 10 to August 27th with a public hearing at the Met Council on August 13th. We used multiple outreach methods to let people know that we were having this public comment period on the amendment, newspaper ads through the Star Tribune, notices on our website, Gov Delivery, and then social media. We received comments through form submission, through email. Also, we received a comment at the public hearing. We did not receive a lot of comments. We received 20 in total, which is not unusual for something kind of this far along in the process. We did get quite a bit of engagement just in terms of awareness, 240 views of the webpage for the amendment, several thousand viewings on Facebook of our posts, and also of our Gov Delivery notifications about both the comment period and the public hearing itself. As far as themes, mostly we heard support for both projects. You have some of the figures up there. We did hear some specific suggestions or comments about station locations or connections to other services, which we forwarded on to the appropriate project offices. Reasons for support varied. A lot of folks are just generally excited about additional transit service or high capacity service. Some people mentioned needs, community needs, both in North Minneapolis and the northwest suburbs, particularly around Blue Line, or excitement around additional connections along the Gold Line. We did receive a few comments that expressed opposition to the projects. These were by far the minority, but you can see the reasons listed out here. Things about funding availability and the conversation about federal funding, overall project costs, concerns about budget and timeline in light of previous projects. But again, these were just a few of the comments that we received in total. We had a couple of commenters that supported the projects but expressed some of the similar concerns listed here from the comments that expressed opposition. As far as next steps, we did not recommend any changes to the amendment itself based on the comments we heard. We did provide responses that are in the comment report to each of them. And as I said, we've forwarded those on to relevant project offices. We'll be going before the Transportation Committee next week for recommendation for approval to the Met Council, which will be on October 8th. So I'm here to answer any questions about themes or specific comments or the projects themselves as best I can. I may have to come back to you if it's real specific on the projects and defer to the project staff, but I'll do my best.
So you won't be back to us with any necessary action on the part of the TAB. It's going right to the Transportation Committee. It'll be dealt with at the Met Council level.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Member Marino.
I'm just kind of wondering why we're not seeing the comment report in our agenda. And normally we'll see the full thing on there. I didn't see it on.
Absolutely. Chair, member, thank you for the question. Absolutely. We'll make sure to provide that.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Bobbitt? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that update. Now we're going to move on to EVs. And we've got a couple of folks that are going to cover this matter for us, both Tony Fisher and Siri Simons from MTS. And I'm looking forward to this report. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to be here, members. My name is Tony Fisher. I'm a transportation planner here at the Council.
Might need to come closer, a little hard to hear.
My name is Tony Fisher. I'm a transportation planner here at the Met Council, and I'm here with Siri Simons, who's leading this work for the Met Council. We're doing a project to really look at public charging needs in the Twin Cities region, and Siri's going to share some information on the overall project and then some of the initial work that we've been doing already.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to walk through a few things. I'll describe the project in general, our timeline, some background information that we've collected to date, and then our approach moving forward. So this project is a planning level analysis of where there are gaps in the electric vehicle charging network in the Twin Cities region. The end deliverable is going to be an interactive online map that allows the Met Council and other members of the public constituents to understand where those gaps are. And we think that this analysis will do a couple of things. First, it will overall support adoption of electric vehicles in the region. Second, it will support the new application category within the regional solicitation update for electric vehicles, so applicants will understand where priority locations for EV charging infrastructure are. The Met Council did receive a charging and fueling infrastructure grant that could help provide funds into that new regional solicitation category. However, given the discussion at the beginning about some of the uncertainty around federal grants, it's a little bit unclear if those funds will be available. And lastly, we hope that what we produce will be useful not just to the Met Council and applicants to the regional solicitation, but to other cities in the region who may want to focus their own localized programs on EV infrastructure. Our project includes 4 different focus areas. We're starting with collecting background information to ground our analysis. We're also engaging stakeholders throughout the project. So from that information collection phase through the identification of gaps and the prioritization of locations phase, there is that focus area of estimating charging needs and gaps. And then, like I mentioned, everything is going to be rolled up into an interactive map and report. In terms of our project,
could you give us a little more detail around that? I mean, you're collecting information. You say stakeholder engagement. Well, who does it mean you're interacting with? Small businesses, convenience store operators, the general public. How do you do that, and what's the
Yeah.
strategy?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So it might help to describe the timeline, and then as I walk through the engagement timeline, I can explain some of the specific
Okay.
stakeholders that we're engaging. So we've started to collect background information, and then we're moving into that engagement phase. There's a couple of different groups that we are engaging. So the first is sort of standard technical stakeholders. We are going to have a technical, or we do have a technical advisory committee that is guiding this project. They're meeting 5 times throughout, and they include representatives from cities, counties, nonprofits. Then we are going to have sort of 2 different streams of engagement. One is going to focus on just the general public. We are going to be coordinating with a separate consultant who's going to be running the engagement, but we expect that we will do things like attend pop-up events in communities to share information about the project. And then we also will be doing more of that broader technical stakeholder engagement. And again, the exact strategies are under development right now, but we're envisioning there will be things like online webinars to engage a slightly broader community outside of the TAC. So that could include utilities, EV charging station installers, and other entities that have more of a technical focus. In addition to those things, we also are doing targeted engagement on utilities, which we've already started, and I'll talk a little bit more about the themes from that preliminary engagement. And then we are doing some outreach to private stakeholders. So that includes EV charging station installers. An example would be ChargePoint, and also potential site hosts. So that could be parking garage operators or other entities that might like to host the equipment. So that's a little bit about the details of the engagement. That's going to run August through January. And then the estimation of the charging needs and gaps is starting just about now. That will run through October. Then we'll be prioritizing locations for investment in the fall and wrapping our analysis up by April. Did that answer your question, Chair? Or did you have additional questions?
No, that helps. But I think, you've got a 34-member board here, and if you can get information to all of us, we can get it to our individual cities, counties, figure out a strategy to help you with the communication piece on it, because I think there's a lot of people that are interested in being able to opine on this, but they won't know how to do it. But to the extent that you can use us as a resource, I would suggest that you do that. Yes, Chair McPherson.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Chair. So quick question, as far as engagement, I think more on that point, we've had some discussions recently regarding our convenience store is a good place to put these things, because they service gas right now, vehicles, they have people come in, and so a few people had a couple really good ideas where they would be a really good host, and maybe it's a partnership, that PPP style public-private partnership opportunity to spend these funds, because then you also have a built-in individual that's going to maintain these facilities. Whereas when you put them in a parking lot at, like next to me, we've got the Albertville Outlet Mall, and constantly you see people stealing those cables because there's copper in there and whatever else they're stealing, but a lot of times those things are out of service because no one's sitting there 24/7. So just a comment.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you for the comment, and Chair and members, I do think we can find opportunities to distribute information through the tab. I think that's an excellent strategy. And then to the comment on both the citing of the stations at convenience stores and the vandalism issue, when we are doing our analysis to prioritize locations, we'll certainly take into account some of the factors that make these sites successful, one of which is 24/7 staffing. So that will be part of the analysis. And then the vandalism issue, I don't know if that's fully captured in our scope at the moment, but it is certainly a topic of interest. And so if there are more targeted ways for us to include it in the analysis, we're certainly open to doing that. All right, so getting into the background information we've collected so far, our first step in starting this was looking at how other communities are developing their EV infrastructure plans and what resources exist to guide the siting and planning of electric vehicle charging stations. We identified a number of different plans from cities, MPOs, counties, and one of the common themes was the importance of a few different factors that guide the identification of site locations. Specifically, what is the dwell time of the vehicles in the area? So how long are those vehicles typically parking at that location? And then what is the land use? And by using those two key pieces of information, we can really learn a lot about what type of charging station makes sense in that particular location, and also how to create an overall network. What we've seen is that an overall complete network of EV charging station includes both level 2 chargers, which are sort of a slower charger that's more appropriate if people are dwelling for a long time, and then DC fast chargers, which are more appropriate if people are doing long distance travel and really need to stop quickly and fuel up. We also know that there's a lot of charging that happens at home, and so level 1 chargers do have a role in the network as well, whether it's at single family homes or at multifamily homes. Another piece of information that we've started to collect, given that dwell time is important, is what dwell time looks like in the Twin Cities region. So for this, we used the replica analysis, which is an aggregation of cell phone data. We compared this data set with the travel behavior inventory information that's available from the council, and found that the TBI data wasn't available at the level of granularity that we wanted for our analysis. So we ended up using the replica data. And you can see in the figure on the screen a little bit about what it is starting to tell us. We have some assumptions built in as far as who is charging. So we're assuming that multifamily residents are always seeking a charge. We have some assumptions about the age of buildings and how that associates with whether or not people are charging at home or not, and those assumptions are under development, which is why that text is in red. And we also are generating some assumptions about income levels and whether people sort of, how likely people are to charge at home based on their income level. So all of that is driving this replica analysis that you are seeing on the screen. And then we've looked at it 2 different ways, both in terms of raw events and in terms of normalized events. And the overall way that we'll be using that is using the normalized data to determine the number of chargers that should be located in an area, and using the raw dwell events to prioritize the locations. So if I go back to this figure, you can see the raw dwell events are on the left. There's quite a bit of dark green in Sherburne and Wright counties. That means that there's a lot of dwell events happening there. But then when you normalize them, the colors get a little bit lighter, which means that those are priority areas, but maybe they don't need dozens of charging stations. Maybe they just need a few. So this is something that will be working into that next step that I mentioned, the identification of gaps in the network. The other piece that I wanted to share was utility considerations. So like I mentioned, we've started to engage all of the utilities that serve this region on this project. And one of our key questions for them was, will you provide maps of capacity in the region so that we can understand if there are locations that would be good for EV charging, or if there are areas where there's limited capacity and chargers may be a challenge, they may require costly infrastructure upgrades. What we generally found out from the utilities is that they can't share those capacity maps right now. However, when we get to the stage in this analysis where we have prioritized locations, they can check that against their records to tell us if there's any locations that we've prioritized that could be a problem because there isn't adequate capacity on the grid. So that was a very valuable finding from those discussions. We also were told that they are not particularly concerned about issues with the grid given the scale of the charging that we're talking about here. We're talking about quite a lot of level 2 charging installations, maybe a few fast chargers, but those are not expected to cause significant challenges for capacity on the electrical grid. A couple of other sort of minor notes. We talked a lot about the value of time of use rates to support load management, and thought maybe there may be some opportunities for Met Council to promote those opportunities. We talked about pole top charging. There may be some opportunities to use those types of applications for projects. However, utilities generally are not interested in that because they introduce a lot of complexity into their process. So shifting gears a bit, the last piece of background information that I'll touch on is we did some targeted research to understand the needs of people living in multifamily buildings and how they might charge, as well as underserved populations and what their unique charging needs are. Some of our key findings is that at-home charging is maybe a little bit less important for people of color. That has to do with the fact that people of color in the Twin Cities are more likely to live in multifamily housing and may not have access to charging at home, so it's a little bit of a complicated research finding there. We also found that the main reason that people of color are interested in electric vehicles is because of reduced costs. And then, interestingly, a top concern among underserved groups is personal safety at charging locations. And so as we do our analysis, it's important to think about how can we site those projects in ways that support personal safety? How can we develop those projects in ways that support personal safety and also address extreme weather, which was found to be another potential concern specific to these groups. We did find that there is research that a lot of multifamily residents are really interested in accessing public EV charging, and so not entirely surprising, but certainly supportive of what we're doing with this analysis. So those are some of the pieces that we found, both based on national research and also some local survey data. All right, and then I'll just share a little bit on our approach to estimating charging needs
Give
and
us
gaps.
a moment here, Commissioner.
Two quick questions. Thank you. This is fascinating. My two questions are, how are you going to keep up on this information as, like, we're adding workforce housing and, like, with our CDAs, we are hopefully renovating a library in Cottage Grove that will have electric vehicle charging stations. Our parks are adding them throughout our county. Are you going to continuously be updating like this gap assessment is my first question. And then the one thing that I'm not seeing, we just did this as a county for our service centers and all the above that I mentioned. The cost of charging. It seems to me that you're moving in a direction would be like, hey, there's a gap in this area, but it would be on an individual project to figure the rest of it out. Like we're just kind of letting you know that there's a gap here. Somebody else can figure out how to fill it and pay for it. And I mean, I'm being serious, but is that kind of the approach then? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Chair and member, so the first question about how will this be updated, we are only contracted to produce the first piece of the analysis, so just sort of do it all once, but we're handing over all of our raw files to the council, and so I don't know, Tony, if you want to speak to the council's plans for what happens after we share the files.
Yeah, Chair and members, there's a broader recognition in the regional solicitation that there's a need to update the data that's used to prioritize funding. And that's, I think, to your second question, the vision of this project is really to support the prioritization of funding sources, such potentially the regional solicitation, the charging and fueling infrastructure grant, if utilities are investing money or other local agencies.
So if, Mr. Chair, so if I would, so just to kind of paraphrase, if there is a gap there that to be able to identify by using this data that there's a gap there to help like with a grant or something like that, to show there is a need there and that the grant would be maybe scored higher to address that need, something like that?
So Chair and members, kind of at the end, once we've prioritized locations, there is a layer of review to consider what the private sector is doing and to really focus the results of this on what the public sector should do.
Okay.
And this project itself won't provide the funding to some degree. That's
Right.
up to
No,
TAB.
that's
But
clear.
it provides the analysis and the mechanism to prioritize.
Yeah, I just meant like if you were filling out a grant, like if a county or if we had a workforce housing project or if we had a library or a park or a service center or a transit station or something like that, and we were applying for a grant, federal, state, whatever, that we would, and we could note that this study stated that there was a gap that may be helpful in scoring, is what I was trying to articulate.
Chair members, I think that'd be a great
Okay.
use of those.
Yep, okay, Member Martinson.
I've got a question, but it's a methodological question, so I think I'll hold it until you're actually done with the rest of your presentation.
All right.
Oh, Peter Ducat.
Yeah, members again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm not fronting, but I'm.
Want to pull your microphone over closer, please?
I'm the mouthpiece for my very talented alternate. Dwell times, as I understand it, is the amount of time that a vehicles waits at, or does its, is it waiting, is it charging at a particular location? Am I correct in that?
Chair and members, yes, that's correct. I would describe it as how long is the vehicle parking at a location, because the data we're collecting now is on all vehicles. So they could be internal combustion vehicles that are parking at a location because the person is going shopping. But they could, in the future, be electric vehicles that are parking at a location, that person's going shopping, and they're using that time to charge.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel.
Go ahead.
All right, so to get into the methodology a bit, the way that we'll be identifying the gaps is first, we'll look at where existing stations are, and we've already started to do this. This is a pretty simple exercise because there's great public data out there on where charging stations are located. Then we're going to analyze those dwell times, so that was the piece that I mentioned we've started on. We're going to forecast future electric vehicle demand, and the way that we'll do this is something I'll get into in a few slides, but we'll generate some assumptions at a high level about future EV adoption in the region, and then we'll use NREL's EV ProLite tool to translate that into needed chargers for the region. We'll match those number of chargers with the existing stations. So we'll say, oh, we need this many chargers, but we have this many chargers. So that gives us our delta that we need to identify locations for. And then we'll think about the land use and the dwell times and match that with appropriate charger types. So like I mentioned, if there is a lot of people dwelling in a location for over 2 hours, that might be an appropriate location for a level 2 charger. Then we're going to adjust the mix of sites to the region's needs when we get into that piece where we're starting to prioritize locations. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what that will entail. We looked at the TPP regional goals. There are 5 total. We've omitted the natural preservation goal because it didn't quite fit with this analysis, so you're just seeing 4. And for each of those goals, we established a priority that we could use to craft our comprehensive EV network. So I'll walk through each of those goals and priorities. The first is our region is equitable and inclusive, and a charging network priority could be prioritizing charging for residents without access to home charging. The next goal is our communities are healthy and safe. So a related priority could be supporting air quality improvements by prioritizing locations for charging where air quality scores are poor, according to MPCA's data. The third goal is our region is dynamic and resilient. So this could be done by promoting redundancy in the network, identifying areas where it could be valuable to offer 2 or 3 or more charging stations because we think that might be a spot that people go in times where they need charging. And then the last is we lead on climate change, and we thought there were 2 priorities we could use related to this goal. One would be siting chargers in high traffic locations. So this is relatively straightforward. We just look at the locations with the highest traffic and prioritize accordingly. And then the last priority is considering geographic coverage. So this would be looking at how do we make sure that we've got charging stations equally spaced throughout the region. And so you can kind of imagine how we can't prioritize all of these things. We need to figure out which of these is most important to the region and then prioritize the locations accordingly. And the way that we'll determine that is through our engagement results. So we've already started to ask the project management team about this, our TAC about this, but this will also be a question that we bring throughout our engagement too, and use the results to refine the locations of the charging stations. So the other piece I wanted to just mention, because we've already started on it, is identifying the future EV demand forecast. So for this, we have set a number of different possibilities. One is that the future EV demand in the region aligns exactly with what is in the statewide multimodal transportation plan, which would be 60% of vehicle sales are electric by 2030. That's a very aspirational target. I think it's unlikely that we will achieve that, but that's the policy goal for the state. Then we have a low scenario, which is based on an aggregation of 12 different forecasts from various nonprofit, private, and industry groups. And then we've created what we're calling an artificial slowing scenario, which is accounting for the fact that many of those forecasts that I mentioned by industry groups were created in 2024. And so they don't account for our current political environment, which could lead to some slowdown in EV adoption. So we're refining these curves. They are a little bit under development. We're working with the PMT and TAC to determine which of these should be used for moving forward with our analysis. So which of these curves do we want to base that EV ProLight run on to determine the number of chargers that are needed for the region. So that is all I have in terms of presentation. I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Member Martinson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, and I want to thank you also for specifically pegging some of the goals to the goals of the TPP. This is something that I've pushed for with respect to the changes to the regional solicitation process itself, and I really appreciate seeing transportation planning being connected back to those goals. That's really helpful. A couple of notes on the presentation. If you're going to be using this elsewhere or with other groups, it might help to define dwell, and it would definitely help to define DCFC for audiences that I had to look it up. So it means direct current fast charger, by the way. So I have a question about so when you normalized the dwell times, it looks like you normalized it based on acreage, but I would have thought to normalize it on something more like density, like population density per unit of land. And maybe that's irrelevant, but it seems like that might have been a more useful normalization. And so I'm curious about why that wasn't done. And then I've got another question about how does the 900-pound gorilla here, Tesla, play into this, and the Tesla chargers, which have their own plugs that are unique, that not everybody that has an EV has the adapter for. I was online, somebody was doing a trip with their family, experimenting with their new EV to see if they could do a trip to the southern part of the state and back. And they were tweeting about it as they went, and holy cow, the number of chargers they ran into that they said, well, this one should work, but it doesn't. This one should be a trickle charger, but it doesn't. This one looks like it starts, but it doesn't charge. I didn't have the right adapter for this one. They finally figured it out, but only through the use of some apparently phone-based apps that helped them to identify where charging stations were and things like that. So I don't know how Tesla, which is slipping, globally fits into this, because they currently, Tesla chargers are everywhere, right? So, so could I get you to speak to the normalization question first?
Yes, Chair and members. In terms of the normalization question, I would say we're still in the early stages of sorting out what way of looking at the dwell time data is most effective. So we started with just the raw data. We thought, let's look at it in terms of acreage, because it seemed like just sort of a generic measure that we could start with. But it's helpful to hear that there may be some value in looking at it a few different ways. I think we will do that before it's finalized and then incorporated into the analysis. So I think that's a good point about maybe checking on the results by population density and a couple of different other metrics for normalization before we finalize it. And then to your other questions about Tesla, and then I think there's maybe a piece about operation, sort of uptime of charging equipment that was baked into
reliability
that
of charging
comment.
equipment.
Yeah, we will be looking at Tesla charging stations as existing charging stations, because many vehicles can use them now, whether they have the adapters, whether the station has a magic dock. Obviously, not all vehicles can use them, and there's some equity issues there, but we will be including Tesla stations in our existing station count. It may be worthwhile to separate them out so that it's very clear which of these are Tesla chargers and which are not. The reliability issue is huge. So previous to this role, I worked for MnDOT and did engagement in our state about charging stations. And one of the biggest challenges that people brought up was, why is this charger not working? Why is that charger not working? So it's a huge challenge, and I think it will come up in this study. One one piece that may offer us some value here is that if there are stations that are funded by the regional solicitation, they have to meet uptime requirements that are tied to federal funds, any FHWA fund. They have to be functioning 97% of the time. So that's not true for all stations, but it is true for FHWA funded stations, which is attempting to get at that issue of reliability.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Other questions?
Just a quick one. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. Do you have any feel for other states? Are there any states who have a more mature program that are ahead of us, or are we leading the charge? Or I'm assuming southern states are much further than we are.
Yes, Chair and members, there are other states that are further along in EV adoption than Minnesota. Colorado, Illinois, and California are some examples that come to mind. I would say each of those states has different reasons for why they're further along in terms of adoption. California, the weather is a huge help, but Colorado is a state that does have winter and the same issues that Minnesota tends to have in terms of concerns about range anxiety. They have a really supportive state government, so they have put a lot of investment into funding studies, funding chargers, and so that has helped in addition to just a general sort of like progressive atmosphere in the state and support for EV charging. Washington State, I would say, is similar in terms of supportive state government that's looking for studies and looking for investment on EV charging.
Chair,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. One last question is.
why don't you come up, Joe, because it's hard to hear you from back there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. So one additional question, as far as the maintenance of these facilities, to that point about other states, what are they doing? What is the successful way, or what are you seeing in other states on how they, you know, if we're gonna try and achieve 97% uptime on these things, that's a lofty goal. I don't even know if gas pumps are at 97%. But what have you seen in other states that maybe we wanna consider and adopt here?
Good question.
Chair and members. So our work primarily focuses on supporting clients with federally funded charging stations. And in that space, what's really valuable about recent federal programs is that those funds can be used for 5 years of operations and maintenance. And what we're seeing is when most states put out RFPs offering up those funds to third parties to install chargers, they include O&M as an eligible expense, and third parties take them up on that. They use those funds to support operations and maintenance. I do think that I'm sure there will be chargers that are installed that as a result of this study and its findings that aren't federally funded. And in those cases, I think what's successful in terms of operations and maintenance is making sure that there is an experienced entity doing it. We've also seen some government agencies own charging infrastructure and sometimes not realize what they're getting into when it comes to the operation and maintenance of the equipment. And they're much more successful if they have a third party that is experienced and is helping them maintain the equipment.
Member Zhang.
Thank you. Similar to, Member Martinson, who mentioned about tying it to the TPP goals. I really appreciated that. My question is around some of the engagement that you did and how you arrived at some of the findings around the different communities. So may you speak more about that?
Chair and members, so the background research to date is just based on research findings. So we've looked at national studies and papers and local studies and papers. We have yet to do the engagement piece of this outside of just the technical engagement that we've done through our technical advisory committee. So that work to speak with specific communities in the Twin Cities is yet to come.
Okay, I'm curious about slide 13 where, you mentioned that the at-home charging is less important for POC, or that workplace charging is attractive to Latino drivers, how it gets specific by race, rather how are they able to tie that, it's because of their race, that's the piece that contributed to those things that they valued more.
Chair and members, that specific research point was based on a study that was disaggregated by race. So it was a study on EV charging interest levels, and then respondents provided their race and the demographic data. So that is where the finding came from. But I do think as we do our engagement, we'll be looking to see if that finding is validated by people's lived experience here in the region, and certainly update the memo that we wrote on the research if
Right,
it
but
feels like
then
it's not.
couldn't it, other factors, couldn't it have been that they didn't own a home, or like low wealth or low income?
Yeah.
Right, so I would be careful in this, because I take great offense in this about categorizing that, it's because of their race that these are the factors that they valued, when it should be much more complex than that.
Chair and members, yeah, I completely understand, and I'm really sorry that you felt that way based on our research. I appreciate that you shared that.
Members, Jared Smith.
Chair, members, I was just going to offer, the Pollution Control Agency has been doing grants for electric vehicle charging for quite a few years under the VW program, and we could share some lessons about uptime. It is not just, we have had requirements for uptime in our grants since the beginning, and we have found that to be very difficult to enforce and difficult to achieve, and have had lots of complaints. So we have some lessons learned that we'd be happy to share, and so you know how to get in touch with me.
It'd be good to know just generally for us too, I think.
Yeah, it's a tricky one that's trickier than it seems like on the surface. So.
Member Anderson.
A couple things. We seem to be kind of in I think the artificial slowing curve graph is probably the most accurate. We seem to be living in an inexplicable phase in time where there's a pretty good denial of a future coming. And I think studies are best when they provide a framework, a playbook for best practices, defining the challenges. How do we harden the installations to reduce or eliminate the copper theft? How do we keep people from hogging the charging station, just going shopping and keep leaving the car hooked up? How do we entice private installations of these and give the private sector a best practice, better ways to look at housing these things. How do we move forward to helping folks with private installations? If we can really become more tactical with this, I think it would offer a lot more value, rather than just study something and throw it out there.
Thanks for that. I'll give you a few observations from a family that bought an EV. And so around town, it's just fine, but the conclusion I've come to generally is that nobody buys an EV for convenience. You buy it for other reasons, and your commitment to the environment is being one of them. But at home overnight, where you've got a 220 installed and you can do level 2 charging at your house, and you got it done overnight, or if you're in a multifamily situation, you can charge overnight at level 2. It's just great. When you're on the road and you decide, okay, I'm taking this thing to Detroit Lakes, you start thinking about, well, where am I going to charge this thing up? And though the car tells you that you can make it all the way there, you don't trust it, that it will make it all the way there. So this was all this issue that you're talking about, Amanda, with, like at Menards in Alexandria, they've got 6 Electrify America fast chargers. And to me, from just doing this all summer long, here's a couple of observations. If we could partner with convenience stores, it's a really good deal, because in 20 minutes with a fast charger, you can get all you need to get to where you want to go, at least for me, to that I don't think it is, the distance from Alexandria, a couple of hours, down to the Twin Cities, it's fine. But if you're over at Menards and you're in a big parking lot at Menards and you're sitting there, you can read the paper, you can go in Menards, go to the bathroom, But the first thing is it's got to be a level 3 charger. The idea of putting a level 2 charger out in the field for somebody that's trying to get somewhere, if I take 10 or 15 minutes longer than it would normally take to be at the gas station, that's just fine, because I think it's well worth it, and I understand it. And I've had some really great conversations at these places where you can recharge. It's like going to a campground. And I've seen the point Brian is making. In Fergus Falls, they've got 6 Tesla chargers that are all really fast. And I see White Lightning pickup trucks from Ford using them. I see GMC pickups using them. They all got adapters. On my car, the manufacturer says if you don't use our adapter, which they don't have, you could void the warranty. So nonetheless, and then, so one time I got to Fergus Falls and all 6 of them were down, to the point Amanda was making from Electrify America. None of them were working. So I spent probably 2-3 hours in Alexandria driving around looking for a place to get a fast charge. Finally found a Circle K then I had to get the app. Then I had to do this, and I had to do that. So the whole thing's been an adventure, but it's actually been more fun than I thought it would be to kind of put up with this stuff as we go through this infant sort of phase of trying to figure out how to make this system work right. And those are just and I've also had the problem of having my car at a charger where it looked like it was going to work and it didn't work, and the car wouldn't release the charger. That wouldn't charge my car. That cost me 12 hours.
Holy moly.
Holy moly.
Until I could get, that was a Sunday night, so no one to call at the car dealership to find out how to release it, and no good roadside assistance. And anyway, I got it figured out, but there's a lot of adventures to be had out there. And so you got to think about it in other terms than convenience. Becky?
Just quickly, my daughter just bought an EV9, a Kia, a beautiful $90,000 electric vehicle. Took it for her first trip, Maine to New Hampshire. A lot of these things happened with a 5-year-old in the car. Stopped at the fast chargers, super fast chargers on the freeway. Her Kia dealer did not give her the adapter because it's a 2026 and they didn't have it yet, did not tell her. Pulled into White River Junction, Vermont, 10 o'clock at night with the child, 14% charge. Found a Hampton Inn, plugged it in, had to sit there all night and get a hotel room. And you don't expect these things because they send you off and they say you can use this charger. No, you can't. And I think that's the biggest problem, that people just get into it. They're told, this is going to be a lot easier than it is. And also, if you put in a level 2 charger, make sure you don't have aluminum wiring in your garage. You need copper. We wired the garage. That's what she had to do.
Wow.
Member Marino.
Yeah, I'll also just say too, the long trips, the road trips, those aren't, for many people, not for everyone, but for many people, those aren't, the regular trips that, need to be taken. They're, they're trips that happen a few times in a year. You go up to a cabin, you go see family. And it really kind of, some of these needs, it kind of shows a hole in what we have as far as intercity transit in the state. We don't have a lot of cheap buses that can go to different cities. We don't have cheap rail that can go to different cities that could handle some of those trips, that could also reduce some of the anxiety of people having to be able to, figure out, well, what do I do on this one situation, and get into situations like that where it's completely unpredictable and somebody can't afford to be able to do a hotel maybe. Right. And then also people who don't have cars to be able to have that option as well.
Yeah.
If I could make a comment, I would say, in kind of counterpoint there, our work patterns in the state changed dramatically with work at home. My internet near Grand Rapids is fiber optic right to the house. I can't get that in the Twin Cities. And all these 10,000, 11,000 lakes, many people are working remotely now. And so they're not going to the lake once or twice or 3 times a summer or 3 times a year. They're going every week or more. So I just think that the whole game plan or the whole scenario has changed dramatically.
So, Mr. Chair, I waited to make my comment because it's not related to the charging of electric vehicles, but rather electric vehicles' use of the roads and highways. The 2025 legislature authorized an electricity as vehicle fuel working group that had its first meeting on Monday, and it consists of 2 state senators and 2 representatives and 6 Minnesota department heads and representatives of a number of different organizations. I was appointed to the group by the League of Minnesota Cities. And our task is to study the issue of how to equitably assess electric vehicles for their use of roads and highways in the state. And we have a very aggressive timetable because we're going to be meeting every few weeks, and we will have to come up with a report to the governor and recommendations to the governor and the legislature by mid-February. So at our first meeting, we did take a look at what other states are doing in this area. So the theory that you might not need to reinvent the wheel, but if I just raised this for the group's awareness, if any TAB members or others would have any thoughts or input you would like to give us, we would appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a good observation. Thank you. I think everybody, well, generally you want to pay your fair share for use of the road, so I'm glad you're working on that. Yes, Member Jean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about just the overall plan and investment going forward. Is this something that the Met Council will continue to invest in?
Chair and members, so the regional solicitation will have a new category for EV charging infrastructure. So the Met Council will pass through federal funds for EV chargers. And then the hope is that the study will also help other smaller communities like cities identify opportunities to put their own funding towards more EV chargers.
Okay. And then the second, I guess the question then is just for the regional solicitation, is there an amount or a percentage, or is it just all based off on the applications that come through? And then my second question around this is it going to be more of a public-private partnership, or is it like who's going to pay for it in the terms of the operations and the use of the utilities?
Chair and members, I am not sure of the amount in the regional solicitation for EV charging. I don't know, Tony, if that has been determined yet.
Chair members, I'm not sure where the conversation is at TAB, but the numbers I've heard are between $6 and $7 million every 2 years for EV charging. Yeah, is that the question, or?
Oh, yep, yeah, and just going forward. And then what about who pays for the operations?
Chair members, so with the federal funds, I believe it does have to be a public sector partner really leading the projects, but they can work with the private sector to, even own and operate the charging stations. That gets pretty detailed into federal rules, but so generally we anticipate private sector working with the public sector on these kind of projects.
Okay, thank you.
Elaine's got a comment on that too, Member Jean.
For the regional station, this is something that's coming before TAB for the funding in the next couple of months. So TAB will be determining the set aside for that. Right now, I think coming from the technical committees is about 8 million.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think it's around 6 or
8.
6 or 7, somewhere in there, yeah.
And TAB will have that information and have a discussion on whether that's the right amount or if it will want a different funding amount.
All right, thank you. Yes, Becky.
Just a quick question, and maybe this is not in your wheelhouse, and I apologize, but what is the average use per day for an electric vehicle? Are people using them less than 15 miles per day, less than 20? And how many people are keeping a traditional gasoline car as a backup for trips longer than just their 7 or 8 mile commute?
Could you repeat the question too, please?
So I think one question was typical use for an EV car in a day.
Yeah.
And we don't have specific information about electric vehicles. They're just, they're not enough of them in the population of vehicles. But when we look at general transportation in the region, we did some analysis looking at different parts of the region, the urban areas, the rural areas. And if I remember right, generally, most vehicles in the urban areas are driving about 30 miles per day. And in the more rural areas, I think the average floats towards 40 and maybe a little bit more than 40. And that's an average. It's made up of a lot of different experiences.
And then how many people are keeping the traditional gasoline-driven cars for longer trips? Are most people having an electric vehicle and a gasoline vehicle, or a lot of people just going strictly EV?
My only knowledge is anecdotal, that I think it's pretty easy for somebody to, if they have two cars in the household, to switch the first one to an electric vehicle. I think some people struggle with committing to that second one. Yeah, I think that's anecdotal. I don't know.
Yeah, Chair and members, I would agree with that. I don't know that I've seen data that really provides us with those results, but I have heard the same things and experienced the same things anecdotally.
All my family members who own, and I have like 5 family members that have EVs, they're all afraid to give up their gasoline second vehicle. And I just hope at some point, we evolve to the point where people don't have that fear, and we do have the infrastructure, and it becomes the norm instead of you're part of a greatest experiment at this point. Thank you.
Yep, Member Schemmer.
It's been a great discussion. I've been trying to figure out how to ask this question, or at least plant the seed. There seems to be a blind spot for all of us as we're talking about building public infrastructure with public funds, that at some point there's going to be enough density of these cars that it's a business opportunity for the Flying J's, the Circle K's, the commercial entities to say, hang on a second, we're selling less gas. And if we want people to pull into these places, we're going to need to invest in our charging system. And so I feel like I have a blind spot, and we probably have a blind spot on what is that tipping point, whether it's density or whether it's revenue, or however you measure it from a business standpoint, where they say, hang on a second, we're going to put the money in these things because it's in a business imperative for us to, especially out on the major roads that you've been talking about, that if we don't, then we're going to be watching people drive past us. And those, you look at a Flying J or a Circle K or the big ones, they have been quite adept at adding services to bring people into their lots, whether it's showers or whatever it is that over-the-road traveler needs. So I know it's not in the scope of this project, but somehow we got to figure out how long do we keep doing public investment if there's a wall coming and the privates say, well, we're just going to do it anyways. And now we've built something that didn't need to be built.
I think that's a really good observation, because that's my personal experience, is that when I got to Circle K and we got the app loaded, and it was really super fast. It was cheaper than Electrify America by about a third. And then you could walk in the convenience store, use the bathroom, and they had a whole setup there so you could wash your car windshield. Over at Menards, you can't wash your car windshield.
I've served on a board of an executive who is very high up in one of these organizations, and they don't make any money selling fuel. That's just to get you in the door. All the money comes from once you're in the door and you're buying the donuts and the pop and the chips.
That's it. People walking around, yeah.
So I would love to know what the economics are for when this tips. And they say, well,
I really have kind of concluded from the summer experience I've had is that to the extent we're going to use public funds, we ought to be investing somehow in a public-private partnership, because that's where people want to stop, where you can do all these things. You can clean your windshield, you can go inside, go to the bathroom, it's convenient, it's right there. And then you can get a beverage, you can get some sunflower seeds or some potato chips or a candy bar. Or a banana if you want to be a little bit more healthy. So anyway, kind of interesting discussion. And I have to say, as I'm repeating myself here, but it has been an interesting experience. And there's people out there that are fearless. They were going to Winnipeg, and they had a whole car full of people. They were stopping in Fergus Falls, and it was, I don't know where they were stopping next, Grand Forks, maybe.
They have a bike on the back?
And I had, yeah. And the guy in the GMC pickup truck, he'd come all the way from Chicago, and he was heading for Winnipeg, you know? And so there's people out there that just figuring it out. But they all had an adapter because they knew that the Tesla was pretty reliable and fast.
Could I say a few words just to wrap up a little bit?
Yeah.
Chair members, I really appreciate the great discussion. Discussion is happening in a lot of places nationally, and there are a lot of different actors working on these problems. The private sector, we're working towards a single standard of charging, which I think is going to help with reliability in the future. MPCA works, MnDOT's doing work. Local city agencies are doing this kind of work. And then Met Council has a role, and we think this study is helpful. We have a couple other things in our budgets in the future. And so there's just a lot of people doing a lot of things. This conversation kind of reflects some of the complexity.
Yep, okay. I also feel for the most part now that level 2 is a waste of time and money. Everybody's interested in speed. You want to get in, get charged, get out. If you're there 20 minutes to 25 minutes, that's okay. No one wants to sit there for 8 hours. Unless it's in your garage.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
TDM update. Wendy, welcome back.
Thank you. Well, it's nice to see everyone again. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to share with you a bit about the Regional Travel Demand Management Program. I'll be sharing a brief history as to where we've been, what we're currently working on, and then what we're forecasting and planning for the future. So I always find it important to talk about what is travel demand management, because sometimes there is some confusion about that. So TDM happens to be the programs, incentives, and strategies that are used to create awareness and encouragement for people to think about traveling without driving alone. So it isn't necessarily the services that people would choose, but it's how they get to making that choice to leave that car at home, potentially. So where we've been is an interesting story. In the Twin Cities region, we've had a long-standing travel demand management program that has had the structure that you see on this slide here. So we have 4 different transportation management organizations, as well as one large TDM partner, which is Metro Transit's commuter programs, and they are that larger blue area that's represented there that does mostly suburban style transportation demand management or travel demand management. And so this has been our long-standing structure that we've had in place for our base activities within the TDM program. And so you might ask, well, what are base TDM activities? They usually involve business-to-business interactions. And so the TDM professionals will go out and they'll work with clients. And in our region, clients are comprised of employers who are helping their employees with commutes, multi-unit residential communities that are helping residents with all travel, and then colleges and universities that are helping their staff as well as adult students with their travel to the campuses as well. And this slide just shows like some examples of what these base TDM activities work through in that business-to-business scenario. There is the public engagement side of things, but ultimately the funding that is passed through from the council to our partners is mostly along that commute scenario of support. There is the other area of the regional solicitation that is supported for TDM, and that is more innovative and competitive projects that are awarded. And I've shown some examples here that of projects that have been awarded since we've started doing this back in 2014. And as you can see, it's a wide variety of style projects. So we're not specifically focused just on transit, we're thinking about all modes. So you'll see some bike activity there. We've got some walk projects that we've helped support, as well as even some parking management programs that have incorporated multimodal conversations. So it really is a wide variety of examples of projects that have been funded. And some of these projects have gone on to be beyond the region and actually been replicated in other parts of the state. In 2020, we did a study that turned into an action plan that was published in 2023, and it came up with these 4 overarching program goals for our travel demand management program. And as you can see, that base activity is more about that goal number 1 with vehicle miles traveled and reducing single occupancy vehicle trips, but it's also looking to expand the program, so to enhance it beyond, say, that traditional client outreach and look at other elements. And taking that a step further, here are some recommended action areas that we're talking about. So one of the things that I like to always show here is this land development-based trip reduction initiative. So this has to do with incorporating TDM in land use policies. Of course, the Met Council is a body that would be able to provide resources and some tools in that regard, but also share what other communities are doing around the country to incorporate TDM with land use. And so that's just one of the areas that's worth mentioning here. This is the current and past approach to how we've been supporting TDM projects and base funding through the regional solicitation. So you can see both that base funding as well as that competitive fund scenario shown on this slide. So that's where we've been. Want to share a bit as to like where we are now and some of the things that we've put into action from that action plan. So this structure is new for the Travel Demand Management Program. It's been in place since January of this year. So the green boxes are what's the new portions of this. And on the top, I'd like to call your attention to the TDM Advisory Group. That is a new group of members. That is an informal group that meets every other month and really help with policy and guidance for our Travel Demand Management Program. And this is a slide that just talks about the different types of category members that we have. So we're looking at having a lot of different perspectives that are brought to the table regarding travel options and how to support that, as well as a geographic representation around the region. Some other things that have happened this year, some of you probably have heard in the news, there's some big resurgences of bringing employees back to offices in a more consistent fashion. And this has provided us with an opportunity to not have to have every single employer think about this, like, how will I do this, how will I do this, but more like bringing all the TDM partners together, bringing together our advisory group as well to talk about these initiatives so that we can bring, say, services to the table. How can transit help? How can we talk about biking? Do we need to talk about carpooling with these initiatives so that people can learn from each other? And the area where I show the different companies that are listed there, those are all organizations that have brought back their employees in September of this year at least 2 to 3 days a week. So it really is a trend that we're seeing, but the fact that I'm trying to share here is just like how we really are bringing together all kinds of stakeholders so that it's more of a regional conversation instead of just like a county or a city scenario that's being discussed, or per employer really too. Another new project that we are working on has to do with a study that we are integrating TDM into Highway Project Development Program. It's a mouthful, but at the end of the day, what this is talking about is really having the Met Council have a study that will show us what kind of resources and tools can we help and provide to organizations, communities that are doing highway planning. In the past, TDM really has focused on that congestion scenario where, oh, we're starting construction. How can we help people through this situation? But this has more to do with identifying when can we bring TDM in the planning phase, certainly construction, but then if we're creating change with people getting out of their single occupancy vehicles during that construction phase, how can we keep that momentum going? So it's really identifying highway planning and TDM throughout the entire life of that corridor. So that's kind of what we've been working on a lot the last year or so. And what we're forecasting to the future, we're really looking forward to sharing this with you, is that we are embarking on a naming and branding project for the regional TDM program. Currently, the regional TDM program has been sitting with commuter programs at Metro Transit, and that's served us well over the past decades that that's been in place. But it's not very intuitive for people to think about getting bike information or how can I be supported by carpooling and things of that nature through a transit website, right? So what we're looking at doing is really providing a regional TDM one-stop shop for all travelers. So whether you're a client or you're a stakeholder or you're the general public looking for information, this is a project that we're looking to embark on and start next year. I've also talked to this group a bit about our technology. So we've made some investments in technology, and this slide helps share where we currently are with one green circle. The red side, or the red circles are talking about where we're hoping to expand in the near future, and then also where we can go. So we have this wonderful enterprise software, and we're really looking forward to enhancing and expanding the program by incorporating more of the modules available. And true and dear to my heart is what comes after that technology capture, is how we are going to talk about our impacts. So with this technology, we'll be able to capture both quantitative data, so as far as like how many people are making mode shifts, as well as that qualitative storytelling element that talks about like how is this affecting people's lives. So we're really talking about VMT and GHG reduction impacts, but through all these different bullets, you can see we have an opportunity to pull in measurements to really share the story about the impact of our regional TDM program. New this year as well with the Regional Development Guide, Imagine 2050, we have a new requirement in travel demand management where we're going to be asking communities to share with us what they are doing for travel demand management within their community. And as I shared in that one slide that showed the map and where we have TDM partners, we do have TDM partners available to be partnering with communities across the entire region. So we're hoping to elevate that, provide resources and other tools so that people can identify how TDM can be a part of their conversations. As mentioned earlier regarding development, whether you are a development in Excelsior that has gone from having a 4-story mixed use to a 3-story, and all the conversations around that, or things that are happening up in Plymouth or elsewhere around the Twin Cities region, really, TDM can be a part of those conversations when people are concerned about congestion and how traffic is going to affect their lives. So this is one of the first steps that we'll take in the Regional Development Guide to really start having those conversations. So our future need is looking to expand, and this is through the regional solicitation process as mentioned in the previous, or the most recent conversation that was having about EV. We're also in this conversation regarding travel demand management. So I'm showing the past request and then what we're looking at for a future ask for how TDM can be funded into the future in order to truly continue to expand and enhance the work that we're currently doing in this realm. And that's what I had
All
to
right.
share with you today.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ms.
So any
Duran.
questions or comments, I'm happy
Any
to
questions for Ms. Duran? In that report? Okay. Those are good organizations that we've got in the region. Member Marino.
Yeah, I saw a lot of focus on like larger businesses. What kind of outreach is being done for small businesses?
Yeah, so it isn't size dependent as far, I just mentioned those big ones because they've got they're public, like I'm able to pull from the news when they have big splashy conversations about bringing people back to work. And so that was more readily available. But we certainly support employers and multi-unit residential communities of all sizes. If there's a desire there to utilize the services around them, and by services I mean infrastructure investments as well, we're there to help communicate to their residents or their employees or their staff and adult students how we can help them get around.
Go ahead.
Is there specific outreach that's being done to like small business associations and stuff like that? Or is it more just waiting for people to come to you?
Yeah, so I do more of the policy and the guidance, but all the TDM partners that were in that slide of the colors and the different organizations that are doing the transportation management organization work, they are doing both. So to be honest, if we were just to wait for people to come reach out to us, we wouldn't be very busy. And so a lot of that work is proactively being pushed out and letting people know about the projects and programs and strategies that people can utilize to really take advantage of the systems that are in place. So it's a two-way street there, but there's a lot of reaching out. I know a lot of the TMOs talk a lot about how they're staying on top of like their chambers, their business development groups, knowing about relocations in and out of all sizes, understanding the development process and what kind of residential communities are being built and things like that. And those are the points where people are like, this is a great time for me to reach out. And so they're looking for those opportunities all the time.
Chair, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation. Just to follow up on that question, on behalf of Anoka County's TMO, which is very active, we've had a number of different personalities in that role for us. We have one position there, and the current one was actually a director of marketing that assisted with the National Sports Center. So she came in with a unique skill set. She's taken it to a whole new level. And in Anoka County, we've addressed those smaller businesses, like you mentioned. We're asking about all the way up to the larger businesses, and each one has their own, unique set of things they're looking at. But it's interesting to hear the similarities between what the large businesses and smaller businesses are talking about, like bringing workers back together or back into the office. They're all struggling with a lot of the same things, just on bigger scales. So,
Yeah.
a lot of that work's going on.
Agreed, yeah, thanks for that comment. I equate it to event planning. So it doesn't really matter how big or small your event is, it still has very similar components that you need to consistently be taking into consideration. And that's really what travel demand management outreach is all about, so.
I'd say the same thing with 494 commuter services. I think it's constant outreach with employers and trying to develop all these different lines of carpooling and van pooling, and it's a pretty successful program, I'd say. There's a lot of bang for the buck in TDM.
Yeah, it is cost effective, for sure. And it really does just help elevate the investments that have already been made in communities. And so it's important for us to make sure that if you invest in something, that people use it right. And so that's really our end goal, is to maybe eventually be put out of business. Everyone's choosing other options all the time, or whatever option works for them at that time. I don't see that in my near future, but look forward to working with many communities to see how we can enhance that.
Yeah, good. Member Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thought I have is just also about partnerships with the type of businesses, especially for the larger ones. I think about Ramsey County, where we're smallest geographically, but also the desire and need for manufacturing jobs. But then for that type of place, like companies are always looking for places where they can have a lot of parking spaces because they need the amount of people. So my question is there partnership with identified businesses that are looking to expand, or partnerships with, some of the groups that are trying to secure larger businesses or attract larger businesses?
Yeah, chair members, thank you so much for that question. It absolutely is an opportunity, and another one of those things that we're always keeping our eye on. Who is expanding? Who's hiring? Like, that's another good way for us to look to. Who, like, just eyeballing things in the HR world. Usually TDM professionals are looking at HR, facilities, land development, relocations, things of that nature. So it certainly is looking at who's expanding. We're also looking at who has essential workers that maybe aren't able to be serviced as well by traditional transit, since they might start earlier than transit starts and things like that. How can we help those folks get to work as well? Or if they've got like shift workers and things of that nature. So we do work with manufacturers. I can mention commuter programs at Metro Transit is working on some really strong programs with Land O'Lakes right now. And so that's been one thing that's been touched on in a lot of different ways there too.
Yeah, and I if I may, I really like that concept about, like, just think about it as you're planning an event, right? Where because of where we are, where it's very developed, like people are making decisions and or businesses are making decisions based off on like number of parking spots available, when really it's much more than that too. Like, that they should also be considering and also be able to communicate ways in which their customer or their workers can get to the location.
Yeah, parking is a commodity, right? And so it's great to look at it that way too, as to how they can be, maybe reduce the need for parking, right, by some of these programs as well. Parking's an expensive commodity. So, yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. All right.
Ms. Jarrett Smith, anything you want to report out from an MPCA standpoint?
Sure, Chair. Thanks for remembering. I'm sorry I came in late.
No, that's fine. We thought we'd wait for that report when you got here.
I'm sure everyone was waiting with bated breath. I appreciate the opportunity. So we do have some open grants right now that I'd want to share out about. One is actually very relevant to the conversation we were having before about electric vehicle fast chargers. So we have an open grant open through December 9th for $1.89 million for electric vehicle fast charging stations along highway corridors. So that's beyond just the metro area, but that's available. And then we have another grant open for freight switcher locomotives. And and that is for $1.4 million and is open through October 22nd. So those are the two big things. We also, we're working on updating the climate action framework in collaboration with our sister agencies at the state level, and that we'll be putting that out for public notice in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that. We'll be interested in hearing feedback.
Okay. When you use that term fast charger, what does that mean at the MPCA? Is that level 3, level 2, what?
That's the DCFC, so it's a level 3 charger, yes.
All right, thank you. Not 2. Okay, anybody have anything for the good of the order? Any other business people want to cover? All right, we'll see you next month. Thanks. We stand adjourned.